Joshua of Egypt, Chapter 10, Passion. Joshua swayed with a precise motion, an old sword in his hand and his teeth gnashed. He was ready for combat. A hammer headed right for him, and he met it with his chest. The hammer bounced off, and he landed with practice to meet his next attack. Where the hammer met him, it hurt, but he was otherwise uninjured. Suddenly he twisted to the side to avoid a spear thrown at him. He had turned his body so that a second spear would meet him in the shoulder. Its tip hit him but did not penetrate. The way he stood, he anchored himself against the power of the throw, and the spear's energy reverberated back through it, cracking the shaft and causing the tip to fly off in a different direction. With little time to recover from the spear attack, a stuffed figure of a man came swinging down toward him. It was a hay-filled dummy with a wooden sword tied to it, to symbolize an attacker. It dangled from a long rope that had a young student on the other end of the pulley system. Joshua dodged left and right to avoid it striking him, and then twisted his entire body around in a circle and met the dummy with his sword. He cut clean through the hay sack and split the test figure apart, hay scattering across the ground. With a thrust, he caught a second hay dummy right in the gut with his sword, skewering it clean through. He whipped his hand with the sword to the side to toss the dummy free of the stabbing. Satisfied with his success, he dropped his guard long enough for a final unexpected attack. 3 rocks flew across the practice yard at him and hit him in the head twice, and then once in the side. It toppled him to the ground, an old sword in his hand skidding across the dirt. "Stop!" Brienne yelled out, and her students all withheld their next volley of rocks. She walked across the practice field and found Joshua still lying on the ground. "Come now, are you actually hurt?" she said in disbelief. He sat up and rubbed his head. "I may be nearly indestructible, but I still know how to feel pain. Why did you throw those rocks at me? I thought that the fake soldiers were always the last part of that test." Brienne held out her hand, and he grabbed it. With a grunt and an enormous yank, she got him to his feet quickly. "Learn to expect the unexpected. Only when your enemies are prostrate in fear or drowning in their own blood is it over." Her hands went straight to his body, examining him. "You hurt? Any bruises? Amazing! You are truly impervious to injury. Huzzah!" Joshua knew exactly why she was doing this. He had been training full 2 weeks with her and her best students. She knew full well that the normal weapons couldn't hurt him, but she always took every opportunity to get her hands on his muscles. She kept from asking him to go to bed with her, so she stuck to instruction and assessments. Yet there's that hand again, squeezing his butt. Joshua jumped a little in a firm squeeze and then quickly stepped away. "So, are we finished?" "Not yet. My students all tell me you're the master of the sword. And right they are. I watch you practice with some of my best, and you keep up with them every time." Joshua picked up the practice blade and looked at its ragged edge. "I wasn't good at first, but with all these sessions of throwing objects at me, I appreciate my ability, my durability. It makes fighting with weapons different. I don't have to worry about keeping my guard up as much as others, and I far less fear attacks. I can be aggressive with my movements. I can keep them off balance." Brienne clapped her hands firmly. "A fine student! A master you'll be. Surely you're worthy of fighting in this next duel. It will be one of legend." Joshua realized what was going to happen. "So, who am I dueling that would be so legendary?" With a toothy grin and an eager voice, she growled out, "Me." Joshua gulped. Well, I guess that will be all right." He held up his sword and took a fighting stance, ready for her to strike at him. She watched this, and then her face contorted into laughter. "You won't start yet. No, I must tell you something first. Even the strongest man must take every opportunity to learn about their opponent. So sit and listen." She walked past him and literally shoved him over so he would sit down. He set his sword down and then crossed his legs to wait for his instruction. Being shoved over wasn't what he appreciated, but he learned not to complain about Brienne. She had her ways. Pulling out her axe, she turned and held it high. "When I fought for my people, I was a fierce and mighty battle maiden of the green lands. But lo, my axe wasn't mighty enough to defeat all the enemies of mine people. I feared that I would die in battle before freeing my people. I had heart and spirit, but that was not enough. I heard tales of the kind gods of the East, gods that fought for us. I called upon them in song, asking for that which would allow me to take mine enemy's head. I drank for 3 days, preparing myself for a final battle, which would cost my life. Then she came to me, a goddess of the eastern lands, Circe. She asked me what I desired most. I asked that my axe would be swift enough to know the blood of a god. Brienne held her axe even higher. She blessed my blood and gave my axe a rebirth and a new purpose. It knew the strength of gods. I rivaled the mightiest of all warriors, either mortal or immortal. Brienne threw her axe hard, and it lodged perfectly into a nearby tree. She swung her hand behind her, and the axe flew out of the tree and back to her hand. She caught it, and in the same motion threw it again in another direction. It smashed through a staked dummy target, the fence behind it, and then a large tree on the other side of the fence jostled. A cracking sound came first, and suddenly the tree lurched to the left, then the right, left again, and fell over. Brienne put both her hands together, and the axe flew back to her. Its impact in her palms moved her back a few inches. She continued, "The axe is part of my soul, part of my heart. I used this weapon to take the head of a god. I presented his head to the others who followed him, and they bowed in fear of my axe, of my blood." She bellowed and took a few deep breaths to calm her warrior's heart down. "I pledged to Circe that if I could defeat the god who tormented my people, I would be hers to command. I would lead her armies into glorious battle. I would return her kindness with the blood of her enemies. She accepted, and told me I would lead her forces against her enemies." Joshua's eyes were glued on her axe. That's amazing, and truly a wonderful legend that will be sung about for years, I'm sure. But why are you telling me this now? Brienne gave him a wicked smile. "Because you're going to face me and my axe in a duel. You must know that this axe is blessed by a god. It can taste your blood like nothing else you have faced this week. You cannot expect your fine body to deflect its blade." "Why are you going to duel me then? Do you want to hurt me?" He was actually a little scared of her right now, worried that her bloodlust for battle was winning her good judgment. Brienne could see that fear in his eyes, and it made her laugh even harder. "No, worry not, my fine pup. I don't want your pelt on my wall this day. I still have plans for you that requires a strong heartbeat." Joshua gulped, knowing her plans. "Okay, so, what now?" "My fine student, you are clever and swift. You know how to fight with abandon. Knowing your enemy's strength shall not prevail. But you cannot expect every battle to be against pitiful mortal weapons. Against the power gods, you cannot be so careless. This duel is to show me if you can fight against odds that are beyond mortal." She walked away from him across the practice field. "Stand, prepare yourself. I want you to disarm me, and I'll try to do the same to you." Joshua got to his feet and prepared himself for the proper stance he was taught. She took up a similar stance opposite him. With a deafening yell, it was Brienne that initiated the combat. Swinging her axe with the skill of a blood-blessed master, Brienne went to knock the weapon from his hand. Joshua sidestepped her and deflected her weapon with his. Again and again she went after him, and he stayed defensive in his posture. He never took an aggressive move, only defense. "No! Fight back! Show me what you can do!" Brienne yelled as she swiped at him. Joshua knew that he had to do something or he was going to lose this fight, and he wanted to win it. He jumped to the side to avoid her strike, but this time he swung his sword at her axe. He hit it, but didn't dislodge it from her grip. It startled her, for he had hit it with incredible speed and precision. Now he could strike at her. He went after her axe and focused to keep her on the defense. If she lashed out at him, he drove in harder to keep her down. Suddenly she dodged his blow and swung back in the same motion, nearly winning the battle. He kept his sword but was almost toppled in the act. Back and forth the combat went. One would get the upper hand and the other would take the advantage away. Their fierceness grew as the time progressed. Students from the various schools came to watch this, having never seen Brienne fight for so long against one opponent. She was famous for her skill and strength. Against any of her students, she would disarm them quickly. Some of the gathering even took bets on how long this would last. Most were betting only on when Brienne would win. Not if she would lose. Only a few brave souls actually bet against her. What's going on here? Magus had arrived upon hearing the increasingly loud clanging of the two weapons. His attention was also piqued by the fact that nearly every person of the temple had gathered in the practice grounds. Haman, who had a rather devilish smile on his face, nodded toward the fight. Looks like Brienne and Joshua are in a duel. So, why all the commotion? Crow, who had been watching from his better perch, jumped down from the top of the nearest building. It has been going on for 15 minutes, and Joshua is matching her move for move. Mage's eyes widened. He is? Incredible. Crow handed Haman a few coins. Joshua. Haman, who had a sack of money already, dropped the coins in. Risky. Brienne has never lost. Crow cracked a smile. Brienne has never faced someone for longer than 5 minutes before. Magus frowned at them. Betting on them? That's against the rules. Ah, come on. This is getting good. Haman shook the sack. Wanted a piece of the wager before it's over? No. Magus scoffed, but didn't demand a refund. He watched the two warriors sparring in the arena as the crowds grew more and more vocal. The friendly wagers had turned this solemn temple of training and knowledge into a ruckus sporting arena. Even a few of the older, experienced students were yelling at the fighters. Brienne was red in the face and grinning like a beast. This combat raged in her blood and excited her lust for battle. Joshua had figured out her moves and evaded her with unnatural skill. He had lost his defensive fear and was now more focused on winning the combat. Zeal replaced the fear of her blade. He was now growling and seemed to excite her all the more, for she growled right back. The heat beat down on their bodies. The crowds were cheering, and the passion for combat raced in their blood. He didn't see the angle of her next attack when the sun shone in his eyes. She missed his blade and cut right across his upper arm. It was hardly enough to injure him, but it drew blood. He screamed in a very canine yelp, and then struck back in rage. Joshua's sword hit the handle of her axe and almost took off her fingers. He watched the axe fly out of her hand and stick into the dirt on the ground. He was breathing so heavily that the pain in his arm was a distant thought. Then he heard it, the roaring cheer of the gathered students. No one in this temple's history had disarmed Brienne in one of these duels. Brienne was stunned beyond belief, but that shock was replaced by a passionate, eager smile. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward her, and she licked her lips. Joshua gulped. Brienne! Taking his hand, she lifted it high. The victor! The crowds cheered louder. Haman shook his head as he handed the money to Crow. I would never have thought it possible. I've watched that dog impress me over and over this past month. I expected no less. Crow sifted through the coins, admiring his haul. Magus watched the students and the teacher basking in the glory of the crowds. Cersei was right. He is destined for greatness. The night came, and Joshua couldn't be happier that Julia was helping him relieve the pain from the day's lessons. Brienne had insisted on a grand feast. She was all about celebrating the glory, even if it was for somebody else. That it was her student that won meant that she could still revel in the triumph. They ate many animals, large fires roared, and Magus even allowed some new wine to be served. Brienne was the only one who got drunk, but that is exactly what she wanted to do. Joshua found that his new body didn't like the taste of alcohol, so he didn't drink as much. But to satisfy the teacher, he still drank some. Now he lay on the bed and groaned. He wasn't sure what hurt worse, all the bruises from being pummeled by weapons all day, or the enormous amount of meat he had eaten. Julia rubbed her special mint oil on his legs and carefully worked the soreness out of the muscles. She had tweaked the formula each day to make it that much better, adding a few other things and increasing or decreasing amounts. Ow, 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 ow! That hurts! Joshua held an arm laid across his face as he relaxed under her tender care. Julia kneaded him with as much strength as she could with her small frame. This week has been worse than the last. Your muscles are all tight knots. What did she do to you today? Same thing she's done for 7 days now. Throw weapons at me. Today she added a few rocks as well, just to make things interesting. Julia snickered. Sounds to me like she's getting at you for not accepting her advances. I've considered the possibility, but I've learned a lot through all this pain. I know how to face off against weapons using this body. I can get the upper hand in a combat by using my own skin to deflect their blows, and then strike while they are confused. That's good, I suppose. Julia worked up his leg as she felt the cloth of his undergarment and stopped. Sit up. I can work on your upper body easier while you're sitting. Oh. He grunted and groaned as he forced himself into an upright position. He didn't say it, but this was his favorite part of the day. She would feel his stomach, his chest, and then his arms. Her soft, gentle hands were so nice against him. She didn't flinch or act disgusted by his fur, as she admitted that she liked to feel his muscles. Her hands worked all over his chest, and then started down the injured arm. The dried blood in his fur caught her attention. What happened here? He looked down at his arm. Oh, yeah, Brienne got me with her axe. What? I thought you couldn't be hurt. I can't. Well, I can, but only with something blessed by a divine source. Brienne's axe is part of her blood blessing. It can hurt me. Well, that was foolish, she scolded him. She could have really hurt you. Why did you let her do this? Wait, where did you say she hurt you? She was feeling the skin under the fur. It's right. Wait. He took her hands away so he could get a better look. The fur still had blood on it, but the skin was undamaged. I looked at this right after the combat. There was a long gash in my skin. It cannot have healed so quickly. Julia felt his arm again. You have let axes, hammers, and apparently rocks break against you and bounce off of your skin for a week, and this surprises you? Your durability must also give you good healing. Wow. Good to know. Julie rubbed some of her oils onto his arm. You still should be more careful around her axe. Who knows what kind of other damage it might have done? I doubt you can regrow an arm. Her muttering made him smile. It's good to hear someone worry about you. So, are you still teaching these kids a thing or two about the healing stuff? Yes. In fact, Magus came to me a week ago and asked if I would teach a group of his students about herbal potions. They're using young students who are going to be trained to be healers. They have magic to help them, but no one here seems to know much about potion blending. I'm no master, but I'll teach them what I know. I'm sure it'll be much appreciated. Trust me, I've been benefiting from your expertise all week. Joshua watched her work on his chest now. Are you through training under Brienne? Who is next? Actually, I'm going to keep working with Brienne for now, but Crow wants to start me working again with a few of his teachers each day. He wants to help me work on my agility and quickness. Crow thinks I have an aptitude for that as well as sword fighting. It'll be nice to get some time away from Brienne. Julia moved up to his neck and shoulders. I'm glad you won't be with that woman all day. She's getting worse about wanting you. Tonight at dinner, she was pretty raunchy. Then again, she was also quite drunk. I know. Her advances tonight were obvious. She was all over me. I think about our battle, and I guess that got her more excited. You should have seen the look in her eyes after we finished. I thought she was going to jump on me, rip my clothes off, and drag me into the woods. Julia was actually snickering. Ever think about giving in? I will not be dragged into the woods. No, of course. Not that. I meant, have you thought about letting her have her fun with you? It might satisfy that thirst of hers. Joshua was a little stunned to hear her say this. No. If I gave in once, it would only make it worse. That is, if she liked it. Oh, I'm sure she would like it. You have a very nice body. Julia said this and then stopped her massage. I didn't mean... I really meant... He softly laughed and took her hands. I know what you're saying. You think I have a nice body. She blushed hard and turned her head away. It's no crime to appreciate a handsome body, is it? He held her hands and felt their softness, which was exaggerated by the oil she had covered them in for the past hour. You know, there are many reasons I should give in to her. Any man with eyes would see that Brienne is sexy, happy, anxious woman who is willing and ready. But I have a reason that keeps me from wanting her, from lusting after her as much as she lusts after me. Julia gulped and kept her head to the side. What? I've thought about someone else. Someone who has only ever seen me as a person, not an animal. Someone who has cared for me even when I have had a hard time caring for myself. She pulled her hands free of his. 3 times she started to say something but stopped herself. Finally she spoke. Since the day we met, I haven't really felt your face again. Not because I'm afraid of it or don't want to, but because I wouldn't want to just feel it with my hands. She reached up and started to feel his chin, his cheeks, his cold nose, and then his lips. I first felt these lips and that strange muzzle of yours and wondered what you were, but now all I want to know is how it feels. He took her hand and brushed up against his lips. How do they feel? I don't know. I need to touch them with something other than my fingers. She couldn't bring herself to say it for fear that he would reject her. Joshua felt her face with his rough hand and then ran the back of his hand across her lips, running that soft fur into her face. Then he took her by the neck and slowly brought her lips to his. They kissed one another for a long moment. Joshua had thought that any woman kissing this dog face would recoil, but she embraced him with passion. It was an experience longed for by both people. Once they had finished their long kiss, Joshua pressed his forehead into hers. I couldn't give to Brienne. I would not betray my heart. Julia held her hands on his chest, feeling it with the desired passion that she longed to touch him with all these times. She backed away from him suddenly and took a few breaths to calm herself down. Go back to your room, please. This change of attitude shocked Joshua, who was ready for more than just kissing. But why? What did I do wrong? Nothing at all. I just need some time to think. About what? She put her hands together and held them, feeling that face in her fingers. I'm a Vestal virgin. Given into the passion with you will break away that forever. And until this very moment, I was resolved to live this life. I have to be certain it is what I want to do. Please, understand. He took her hand with his and held it kindly. I understand. My life was changed against my will. I won't let you change yours in the heat of passion. Take the time you need. I'll wait. I'll save myself for your answer. Thank you. Now, rest. You have a long day ahead, as do I. Joshua kissed the back of her hand and said, I want you to know, if you decide to remain faithful to your vow, I will understand and support you. I will still be your friend. Nothing will change about that. Thank you. He left her and entered his own room next door. Julia could hear him lock the door and then put the wooden security bar down. He was likely fearful of a drunk Brienne tonight. Julia sat on her bed for a long time and didn't move. She had a million thoughts rolling in her head. She had made a vow in earnest so many years ago, assuming that her life would remain much like any other temple priestess. But now life deviated in such a problematic way. Coalia had told her that she would change, that her life goals would be new and strange. She also said that sometimes we must find fresh paths in life, paths that take us away from what we expect to what we want. Could she be giving her the freedom to break her vows? What would it cost her? A single tear rolled down her cheek as the pressures of this decision weighed heavily on her heart.